faction with its social privileges and the agreeableness of friendly intercourse among its members, to prevent its making its claims to being a system of knowledge and science as perfunctory and little onerous as possible. The improvement I have spoken of must be attended, and I believe is destined to be attended, by an awakening to the deep significance of the craft's internal purposes. And since I have referred to what I have termed the rough, ashlar conception of that purpose, you have the right to ask me now to state that loftier conception which may be regarded, in comparison, as the perfect cube. The answer to this inquiry I shall not attempt to state in so many words. I invite you to regard this whole lecture as an indication of what as that answer must be. To some extent I endeavored to formulate that answer upon a previous occasion, but whilst I then entered rather into the details and minutiae of the craft system and symbols, I shall treat the subject now upon broader lines and deal with Masonry in its wider and more philosophic aspect. I said upon that occasion, and I must repeat it now, that in its broad and more vital doctrine Masonry was essentially a philosophic and religious system expressed in dramatic ceremonial. It is a system intended to supply answers to the three great questions that press so inexorably upon the attention of every thoughtful man, and that are the subject around which all religions and all philosophies move. What am I? Whence come I? Whither go I? It is a truism to say that in our quieter and more serious moments we all feel the need of some reliable answer to these questions. Light upon them is the predominant wish of our hearts, and upon such light as we can obtain, whether from Masonry or elsewhere, depends our philosophy of life and the rule of conduct by which we regulate our life. In a larger sense, then, than our conventional limited one, the Masonic candidate is presumed to enter the order in search of light upon these problems, light that he is presumed not to have succeeded in finding elsewhere. If his candidature is actuated by any motive other than a genuine desire for knowledge upon these problems, which beyond all others are vital to his peace, and by a sincere wish to render himself, by the help of that knowledge, serviceable to his fellow creatures, then his candidature is less than a worthy one. The reason why no man should be solicited to join the order is that in regard to these matters of sacred and momentous import, the first springs of impulse must originate within the postulant himself, the first pleas of his preparation must ever be in his own heart, and it is to the cry and knocking of his inward need, and foe are no less a motive, that in theory, though scarcely in practice, the door to the mysteries is opened and the seeker enters in and finds help. At another stage of his symbolical progress the candidate learns from his superior brethren, that they, along with himself, are in search of something that is lost and which they have hopes of finding. And it is here that the great motive of this and of all quests, as well as the clue to the real purpose of Masonry, appears prominently and is stated in emphatic terms. Masonry is the quest after something that has been lost. Now what is it that has been lost? Consider the matter thus. Why should we, or the world at large, require systems of religion and philosophy at all? What is the motive and reason for the existence of a Masonic order and of many other orders of initiation, both of the past and the present? Why should they exist at all? I might reduce the matter to the compass of a small and personal point by asking, why have you come to hear this lecture, and why should I have been striving for many years to acquire the information that enables me to give it? If it be not the fact, as indeed it is, that every man in his reflective moments realizes the sense of some element of his own being having become lost, that he is conscious, if he be honest with himself, of the sense of moral imperfection, of ignorance, of restricted knowledge about himself and his surroundings, that he is aware, in short, of some radical deficiency in his constitution, which, were it but found and made good, would satisfy this craving for information, for completeness and perfection, would lead him from darkness to light, and would put him beyond ignorance and beyond the touch of the many ills that flesh is heir to. The point is too obvious to need pressing further, and the answer to it is to be found by a reference to a great doctrine that forms the philosophic basis of all systems of religion, and all the great systems of the mysteries and of initiation of antiquity, viz., that which is popularly known as the fall of man. However, we may choose to regard this event, and throughout the history of the human race it has been taught in innumerable ways and in all manner of parables, allegories, myths and legends. Its sole and single meaning is that humanity as a whole has fallen away from its original parent source and place, that from being embedded in the eternal center of life man has become projected to the circumference, and that in this present world of ours he is undergoing a period of restriction, of ignorance, of discipline and experience, that shall ultimately fit him to return to the center whence he came and to which he properly belongs. Paradise Lost is the real theme of Masonry no less than of Milton, as it is also of all the ancient systems of the mysteries. The Masonic doctrine focuses and emphasizes the fact and essence of this loss. Beneath a veil of allegory describing the intention to build a certain temple that could not be finished because of an untimely disaster, Masonry implies that humanity is the real temple whose building became obstructed, and that we, who are both the craftsmen and the building materials of what was intended to be an unparalleled structure, are, owing to a certain unhappy event, living here in this world in conditions where the genuine and full secrets of our nature are, for the time being, lost to us, where the full powers of the soul of man are curtailed by the limitations of physical life, and where, during our apprenticeship of probation and discipline, we have to put up with the substituted knowledge derivable through our limited and very fallible senses. But, whilst Masonry emphasizes this great truth, it indicates also, and this is its great virtue and real purpose, the method by which we may regain that which is lost to us. It holds out the great promise that, with divine assistance and by our own industry, the genuine realities of which we at present possess but the imperfect shadows shall be restored to us, and that patience and perseverance will eventually entitle every worthy man to a participation in them. This large subject is mirrored in miniature in the craft ceremonial. The east of the lodge is the symbolic center, the source of all light, the place of the throne of the master of all life. The west, the place of the disappearing sun, is this world of imperfection and darkness from which the divine spiritual light is in large measure withdrawn and only shines by reflection. The ceremonies through which the candidate passes are symbolic of the stages of progress that every man, whether a formal member of the craft or not, may make by way of self-purification and self-building, until he at length lies dead to his present natural self, and is raised out of a state of imperfection and brought once more into perfect union with the Lord of life and glory, into whose image he has thus become shaped and conformed. It is in this large sense, then, that Masonry may become for us, as indeed it was intended to become by those who instituted our present speculative system, a working philosophy for those brought within its influence. It supplies a need to those who are earnestly inquiring into the purpose and destiny of human life. It is a means of initiating into reliable knowledge those who feel that their knowledge of life and their path of life have hitherto been but a series of irregular steps made as haphazard and under hoodwinked conditions as to whither they are going. Not without good reason does our catechism assert that Masonry contains many and invaluable secrets. But these of course are not the formal and symbolic signs, tokens and words communicated ceremonially to candidates. They are rather those secrets which we instinctively keep locked up in the recesses and safe repository of our hearts, secrets of the deep and hidden things of the soul, about which we do not often talk, and which, by natural instinct, we are not in the habit of communicating to any but such of our brethren and fellows as share with us a common and a sympathetic interest in the deeper problems and mysteries of life. I have said already that Masonry is a modern perpetuation of great systems of initiation that have existed for the spiritual instruction of men in all parts of the world since the beginning of time. The reason for their existence has been the obvious one, resulting from the cardinal truth already alluded to, that man in his present natural state is inherently and radically imperfect, that sooner or later he becomes conscious of a sense of loss and deprivation and feels an imperative need of learning how to repair that loss. The great world religions have been ordained to teach in their respective manners the same truths as the mystery systems have taught. Their teaching has always been twofold. There has always existed an external, elementary, popular doctrine which has served for the instruction of the masses who are insufficiently prepared for a deeper teaching, and concurrently therewith there has been an interior, advanced doctrine, a more secret knowledge, which has been reserved for riper minds and into which only proficient and properly prepared candidates, who voluntarily sought to participate in it, were initiated. Whether in ancient India, Egypt, Greece, Italy or Mexico, or among the Druids of Europe, temples of initiation have ever existed for those who felt the inward call to come apart from the multitude and to dedicate themselves to a long discipline of body and mind with the view to acquiring the secret knowledge and developing the spiritual faculties by means of experimental processes of initiation of which our present ceremonies are the faint echo. It is far beyond my present scope to describe any of these great systems or the methods of initiation they employed. But in regard to them I will ask you to accept my statement upon 2 points. 1, that although these great schools of the mysteries have long dropped out of the public mind, they, or the doctrine they taught, have never ceased to exist. The enmity of official ecclesiasticism and the tendencies of a materialistic and commercial age have caused them to subside into extreme secrecy and concealment, but their initiates have never been absent from the world, and, 2, that it was through the activity and foresight of some of these advanced initiates that our present system of speculative masonry is due. You must not imply from this that modern masonry is by any means a full or adequate presentation of these older and larger systems. It is but their pale and elementary shadow. But such as they are, and so far as they do go, our rituals and doctrine are an authentic embodiment of a secret doctrine and a secret process that have always existed for the enlightenment of such aspirants as, putting their trust in God, as our present candidates are made to say, have knocked at the door of certain secret sanctuaries in the confidence that door would open and that they would find in due course that for which they were seeking. Those who instituted modern speculative masonry some 250 years ago took certain material as lying ready to hand. They took, that is, the elementary rites and symbols pertaining to medieval operative guilds of stonemasons and transformed them into a system of religio-philosophic doctrine. Thenceforward, from being related to the trade which deals in stones and bricks, the intention of masonry was to deal solely and simply with the greater science of soul building, and, save for retaining certain analogies which the art of the practical stonemason provided, thenceforward it became dedicated to purposes that are wholly spiritual, religious and philosophic. Perhaps the chief evidence of the transformation thus effected was the incorporation of the central legend and traditional history comprised in our third degree. Obviously that legend can have had no relation to, or practical bearing upon, the operative builder's trade. I will ask you to reflect that no building of stone, no temple or other edifice capable of being built with hands, has remained unfinished through the death of any professional architect such as Hiram Abiff is popularly supposed to have been. The principles of architecture, the genuine secrets of the building trade, are not and never have been lost. They are thoroughly well known, and the absurdity is manifest of supposing that masons of any kind are waiting for time or circumstances to restore any lost knowledge as to the manner in which temporal buildings ought to be constructed. We know how to erect buildings today quite as well as our Hebrew forefathers did who built the famous temple at Jerusalem, and indeed a well-known architect has stated that most of our London churches are, both for size and ornamentation, far larger and more splendid than that temple ever was. Our duty then is to look behind the literal story, to pierce the veil of allegory contained in the great legend and to grasp the significance of its true purport. That which is lost is to be found, we are told, with the center. But if we inquire what the center is, the average mason will give you nothing more than the official, enigmatic and not very luminous answer that it is a point within a circle from which every part of the circumference is equidistant. But what circle? And what circumference? For there are no such things as centers or circles in respect of ordinary buildings or architecture. And here the average mason is at an utter loss to explain. Press him further, why with the center? And again he can only give you the elusive and perplexing answer because that is a point from which a master mason cannot err, and you are no wiser. Brethren, it is just this elusiveness, these intentional enigmas, this purpose puzzle language, that are intended to put us on the scent of something deeper than the words themselves convey, and if we fail to find, to realize and to act